Hello and welcome to the MADEcast, the official podcast of the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, a series of lectures on video game history as part of the MADE's ongoing effort to preserve history through teaching and displaying playable exhibits of rare games and consoles.
While life in the time of COVID has forced us to close our doors, the support of people like you has allowed us to continue to bring history to you through lectures and interviews like the one you'll hear in a few minutes. I'm Miles.
I'm Chen.
And I'm Anthony.
In this rare double feature chat, Alex catches up with Keith Kaisershot to talk about his joining the MADE, the game Deep Sea, the Apple Pippin, playing with John Romero, and many, many more topics. This is a rare double-wide interview of 40 minutes long, so we're going to keep our segment a bit short and just let them do the talking. This is a great chat, and we really enjoyed listening in.
Hello, we are back with Keith Kaisershot. Hey, Keith.
Hey, Alex. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, good to talk to you despite all of the crazy COVIDs. Keith, you've been with the museum since almost the very beginning. How'd you find us?
I had moved to California in 2011, and the game studio that I was working with at the time, I had a couple of friends there that one evening they said they were going to head into Oakland to attend a talk given by R.J. Michael of Amiga fame, and I had heard of that name, and I thought, oh, that sounds really interesting. I didn't know he was in town, so I thought, hey, could I go with you and check this out too? So I hitch a BART ride with my two buddies, and we go to this third floor office, space in the heart of Oakland, downtown. Late evening, it's dark outside, and it's this mostly empty room, but with shelves of old video game ephemera, artifacts and things like that. And I thought, what is this place? Like, it makes sense to me how they got R.J. Michael to talk, but what is this place? How can I get involved? It seems like a really cool place and somewhere where I would kind of feel at home and where I feel my talents could be useful. So that night I got to know Alex and basically introduced myself as, hey, I'm kind of really, really interested in vintage Apple, vintage Macs, and I see that you are trying to start up a museum based around vintage video games, and I wonder if if the Venn diagram of my talents and what you need for the museum, if there's maybe an intersection there, if I could help out. And it seemed that you were on board with an idea, and I guess that's kind of how I got involved.
And you've been helping out incredibly a lot of our projects ever since. I mean, from the Doom cluster to one of the first things you did was set up Robin Arnault's Deep Sea, was it?
Deep Sea, yes, that's what it is. Yeah, and in fact, the MADE actually has the original Power Mac G5 that he developed Deep Sea on and used for administering demos over the years as he was developing and showing off that project. And so, the
headset and the whole headset.
The headset and the custom mask that Robin built for it that has the two microphones built in, that one of them is near your nose, so it tracks you breathing, so it can tell whether you're breathing or not, which is an integral part of the game and the experience.
Yeah, no, the whole point of that mask is so that you feel like you're underwater because you hear that.
Exactly.
That Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what the game is? Nobody here would have ever heard of it. Or not.
I mean, the Deep Sea, the high concept of Deep Sea is that, you're at the bottom of the ocean. It's pitch black. You can't see anything. And there's a deep sea monster after you. And since there's nothing else but you and this monster, it can hear everything. Like, it's very attuned because there's nothing to see. So, the rest of your senses are heightened. So this monster can hear everything going on, including your breathing. So you're in this deep sea sub and you're trying to hunt the monster before it gets down to you. So it's an audio only version of Hunt the Wumpus. If you're familiar with that game.
Yeah, it has a joystick.
Yes. So you imagine yourself in a sub deep at the bottom of the ocean, again, where you can't see anything, but all you have to rely on are audio cues. So you can hear the monster going around you, going behind you, going in front of you, kind of rushing by. And the joystick is all you have to defend yourself. So you can rotate your sub and fire. I believe all you can fire is missiles. You can't just do
like
torpedoes, yeah. And if you miss the monster, well, then you don't hear it. But if you hit the monster, then it lets out a cry of pain, right? And so the goal is to hit the monster so that it doesn't get to you. But this entire time, you find yourself holding your breath because as you're breathing, you release bubbles, and the monster can hear you breathe, and so it uses that to kind of echolocate where you are, and you don't want that, obviously. So,
I think the real key to the success of Deep Sea as an installation, as a game, and notably a game that blind people can play, is the fact that Robin Arnault is an audio designer. So the audio in the game was of like movie quality.
Yes, definitely. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on the history here, but I think Robin was still a film student when he developed that.
Was he? I don't know.
I think so. This is a while ago, I think around 2010, 2011?
2011, 2012, yeah.
Maybe he was just out of film school. I can't remember. But no, I mean, Robin has got a professional background and professional training on this. So, I mean, it's no surprise that the audio is phenomenal.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's this big whale thing coming at you. There's sonar pings, there's bubbles going off, and then you hear like the ticking of a teletype, and like people, oh, the monster has arrived.
Right.
Ah!
I remember watching at the MADE, somebody demoing this game, watching somebody else play, and towards the end of the game, I think they were so startled by it that they just ripped the headphones off and ripped the mask off.
Yes, absolutely. It's incredibly immersive.
Yes. Very visceral. Absolutely. Yes.
Then you also set up the Doom cluster for us so John Romero could stomp noobs at GDC.
That was a case of the right place at the right time. I was in between video game gigs, and I had about 6 months between January of 2014 and the summer of 2014, where I was just kind of experimenting with VR and trying to figure out what was working, and hey, could I maybe make it doing VR games for a living? Spoiler, no. But GDC was during that time in March, and I remember, Alex, you reached out to me because John Romero was going to be at GDC. I think it was some kind of anniversary for 2014 would have been the 20th of Doom 2.
Yeah, there you go. 20th.
Yeah, there we go. Yep. So John Romero wanted to set up this area at GDC where you could challenge him to deathmatch. And for the uninitiated, that's just something that if you know what's good for you, you'd never challenge John Romero to a deathmatch unless...
Yeah, it'd be like Mike Tyson saying he'll fight any and all comers.
Yeah. I mean, if you come at the king, you best not miss. So we set up about 6 to 8 low-end, Dell laptops, because Doom runs on anything. It doesn't matter.
What I went to Weird Stuff, and we had a budget.
Oh, man.
And Weird Stuff had a bunch of Windows XP laptops for $200 a piece, way overpriced. Like, those things were worth $20, but I love Weird Stuff, so we spent our money.
I miss Weird Stuff so much. But yeah, those machines, we set those up, and they were very easy to set up and very portable. So it was great for us because in and out of Moscone West, and we're ready to go.
Razer threw keyboards and mice at us too.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's right, and headsets. Yes,
and then they're all plugged into these 2001 Dell XPS laptops.
The juxtaposition, the disparity between this modern equipment, brand new equipment from Razer, and these ancient laptops.
Right, and they still work. And honestly, that 133 machine was blazing for Doom.
Oh yeah, it's overkill for Doom even. But no, that happened the entire week, Monday through Friday of the conference, and I remember setting up on the server machine demo recordings. So we got recordings of everybody playing all through the week, and then when the conference was over, I remember getting in touch with you and saying, hey, I recorded the entire set. What do we want to do with these demos? And he's like, put these on YouTube. This is going to be great. People are going to want to watch this.
Absolutely. And honestly, that one of those, we put up like 20 videos, but honestly, one of them is our most popular video by a long shot on the MADE's YouTube channel. And, keep in mind that the MADE has like the original episodes of GamePro TV shows, Second Take, and like some unseen footage stuff. But those videos have like almost 100,000 views. People love that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, people love to watch John Romero poning noobs. What can I say?
What do you remember when you played against him?
My my biggest memory of that week was Tuesday morning. I got there bright and early to set up all the machines, and of course John was there waiting. He's waiting for, in case anybody was also showing up early and wanted to play, which happens some of the days. But this Tuesday I was the first one there, so I thought, you know what, sure, we'll kick this off. So I said, hey John, let's jump into map 1 of Doom 2 and kind of do a warm-up match. So we get into it, and I'm actually doing pretty well. I've got maybe about 10 frags on him. It was about maybe 10 to 1 or 2 or something like that. And I got cocky. I turned. It was best out of 30, I want to say.
Yeah, no, it had to be like 20 to 10. You had to be above by 20.
Yeah, something like that. I think it was. Yeah, and so I'm besting him by about 10 points, and I turn to John. I'm like, what's the matter, John? I thought you were good at this game. You gone soft on us? Oh, John did not like that at all. He went from smiles on his face, having a good time, to throwing his headphones on, serious poker face. And at that point, I instantly regretted saying that, because he proceeded to wipe the walls with me in no short order.
He went right for the BFG every time, didn't he?
Yeah. Rocket to the face after rocket to the face.
No, a lot of people were commenting on him going right for the BFG and using the BFG out of the gate and how that wasn't fair. But, it's in the game.
All is fair in deathmatch.
Yeah, it's in the game. But he specifically asked us to set it because Doom Deathmatch was it's like tennis or something. Like, you have to win by a certain amount, right? Like, he had to have 20 more kills of you in order to win. And he had no problem doing that to everybody. It's not like it was 5 to 6 or 7 to 8 or 10 to 20. It was 20 to nothing most of the time. 20 to -6.
I also remember the map set that we chose was most, if not all, maps that he worked on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know you did that for a reason. And so I'm looking here, and actually the most popular video from that set has 203,000 views.
Wow.
That's the longest one. That's the 42 minutes. Oh, okay, there's one that's an hour. But
that's a lot of noobs looking to learn from the master.
They certainly are. They're getting owned. And that watching that is joyous. So I wanted to turn now to the work that you have done to preserve an absolutely, I rarely call anything in the museum horrible, but your work to preserve an absolutely horrible video game console.
Which one would that be?
Oh, why don't you say the word? I don't want to say it.
The MADE has a number of them.
Well, yes, but there's only one that the developers had to crash in order to get it to quit their game and restart to the menu.
Oh, you must be talking of the Bandai Pippin.
Yes. Oh, I noticed you take Apple's name out of it. Yes.
So that's a pet peeve of mine, and I just want to start by kind of clearing the air in that. A lot of folks on the internet like to describe it as the Apple Pippin, and I don't understand why, because
it's the operating system.
There are no Apple logos on the Pippin unit. There are no Apple logos on the controller. There are no Apple logos on any of the games. It'd be like calling the TurboGrafx the Hudson Soft TurboGrafx. No one calls it that. They'll call it it's the NEC TurboGrafx, because NEC built the things and they marketed the things, they sold the things.
And nobody calls the Dreamcast the Microsoft Dreamcast, despite the fact.
Well, yeah. It's yet another example. So I don't get this Apple Pippin. Like, where's that coming from? I don't know. But the internet's going to internet, I guess. I just hope people kind of look and make sense out of it. Anyway, sometime around, I can't even remember the exact time frame. I'm just going to say 20. Let me back up and go back to, I'm just going to throw out 2016 as the time when I picked up a Pippin for myself. I was on eBay and I found an unbelievable deal. I got one of the rare US quote unquote, one of the I call it space gray, but they call them the black Pippins, intended for the U.S. market. $200 on eBay, and I get it. And of course, the description says, "Oh, this doesn't work." I get it home. I open it up. I physically open up the console. How come this doesn't work? Well, the first thing I find is a dead wasp inside. So, I wonder where this thing was kept. But put it back together, hook it up, and after cleaning it out thoroughly on the insides, clearing the bugs out of the system, as it were, fire it up, hook it up to my TV, and it works just fine. So okay, well now what can I do with this thing? I mean, it marries two things that are key to my growing up. Macs, the classic Mac OS, and video games. Well, the Pippin marries both of them together. This is a video game Mac that plays Mac games, right? So I look around and, well, what games are there for this thing? Well, there's the obvious Super Marathon was the one that everyone, I think, associates with the system. Super Marathon's nice, but I've played Marathon. I've played Marathon 2. I'm familiar with those games. They play better on a real Mac, so I don't know if I want to mess around with that on this system. But there was other software developed for it too. Bandai didn't market it exclusively as a gaming system. They wanted it to be something that you could use in 1996 to be your first gateway to the internet.
Mm-hmm. And so encyclopedias and edutainment.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah, and if you recall, like sometime around 96, 97, Microsoft and Philips were trying to do the same thing with Web TV, and I think there was maybe another system like that was. These are internet appliances were things in Japan, not so much in the US, but that didn't stop Bandai from trying. Anyway, one of these applications is something called PEASE. PEASE, like P for Pippin and then E's. I don't know what the rationale behind the name was. It wasn't an acronym as far as I know of, but it looked a lot like the @ease program, if you're familiar with that. that Apple shipped on their Performa line back in the 90s.
Yeah, and the Mac OS wasn't simple enough.
Right. Yeah. Well, they had to compete with what Packard Bell had with their Navigator application, I guess, that shipped on those machines. But anyway, this PEASE application would launch a number of built-in applications that shipped on the CD, the PEASE CD. But if you connected the Pippin to an Apple Talk network through its serial port, you could run applications hosted on another Mac. So, this is interesting. Well, then I could play some games on the network that the Pippin otherwise isn't designed to run, like Prince of Persia runs great on the Pippin. Doom runs great on the Pippin, as it turns out.
Well, it's just an LC3.
The Pippin hardware is quite a bit more advanced than an LC3.
So what is it, Quadra?
It's even better than that. It's a Power Mac.
Oh my goodness! It's 601.
It's a 603. So
603. Oh my god!
Well, the 601 is a little bit better than the 603, if you can believe it. The 603 is the low end version of that. It was intended for laptops and things.
Yes, but it came out after this. I mean, just timing wise, they must have that must have just come off the dies.
Yeah, I mean, timing wise, the Pippin came out around the same time as the Power Mac 7500. In fact, I'm convinced that it was even slightly based on the 7500 because the 7500 and the Pippin, their display drivers have the same name. So, it makes you wonder, who borrowed from who? Yeah. But I mean, the Pippin, that based on Power Mac hardware in 1996 packed a bit of a punch. It's some decent hardware there. And in fact, the video hardware, Apple was just starting to do this with their video hardware. You don't get 3D acceleration. I mean, they weren't that forward thinking, but games that run in 8-bit mode, you do get page flipping. You can get double buffering. So that is at least something. Now, at the time, Macs didn't really do that. Certainly not the low end 68K Mac. So this was something, they're trying to throw a bone to game developers here. That's trying very hard, but they tried.
It's on par with it's faster than an N64 chip, I believe. That's also a RISC processor.
The N64, I believe, was clocked somewhere around 90 megahertz. The Pippin was clocked around 66. Oh. So it was clocked faster than the PlayStation. I'll give you that.
Certainly.
Yeah, but the PlayStation also had a little bit of a hardware assist, a little bit more. The RAM was faster, I think. Yeah. So, and not to mention developer support. Nelly, can I get into that? But anyway, back to the Pippin. I saw that this was running some interesting games, and it's a real shame that games like Doom didn't ship on this system. It might have been a contender. But Marathon is great, but Marathon wasn't exactly a household name in 1995, 96. You wanted things like Quake. You got to have Quake on your system. So I thought, how come nobody actually did this, or how come in 2017 there's no homebrew for Pippin? What's going on here? So I dug into it a little bit and saw, the reason why there's no homebrew is because the Pippin implemented an I can't call it anti-piracy because you can pirate Pippin games till the cows come home. But what it did was it was protection against unauthorized games being released for the system.
Similar it's publisher protection.
Publisher protection. Thank you. Yeah. So similar to what Nintendo did with the NES and with what Atari did with the 7800, which is actually a great example is what Atari did with the 7800. Every game is signed by a private key within Apple, similar to Atari. Every game had to be signed by the manufacturer with a digest embedded into the game that was checked by, I should say, a public key embedded in every console. And if they tried to verify the signature and it didn't match, well, we're not booting up your game because we don't know who signed this. It wasn't us, so we're not going to let you play. Apple did this mostly, I believe, because the Pippin retailed for about $599 in 1996, which compared to the PlayStation, it's obvious why the Pippin didn't do so well in the market. I mean,
no, that's the same price as CDI.
Well, even CDI and 3DO are two good examples too. I mean, imagine you're a gamer in 1996.
No, it's too expensive. I'm not arguing it's not too expensive.
Yeah, it's like I can buy this $600 machine that can play Marathon, or I can buy this $200 machine that can play Jumping Flash. It can play Tomb Raider. It can play all these other things.
It didn't exist in fact. My point is that it's not the only $600 CD console.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. But even at $600, this was way, way, way less expensive than Apple's lowest end Power Mac at the time. And Apple was worried about this to the point that they had rules with the Pippin project that any licensee of the Pippin, and in 96, I believe this was only Bandai, but I think they had a couple other parties interested, but any licensee of the Pippin was forbidden from doing a number of things. They couldn't mention the Macintosh in any of their marketing. So it didn't run Mac OS. It ran Pippin OS, not Mac OS, Pippin OS. And I believe in the manuals, I don't think, I'd have to go back and check, but I remember at least in a number of the tech notes and some of the developer things, they don't mention Apple Computer. They're credited as ACI. Technology by ACI. Gee, I wonder who they are. Anyway, this is all because Apple was just super paranoid that people were going to buy Pippins as cheap Macs. Yeah.
Well, Apple has clones at this time.
Right. The clone effort was just getting off the ground, and Apple was scared, really, that people were going to make better clones than Apple was on their own machines, rightfully so. And so they said, okay, well, sure, we'll do this Pippin thing, but it's not allowed to run Macintosh software. So hence this protection at every boot of the Pippin to make sure that you're not trying to run Microsoft Word on your Pippin, trying to play this on your TV. You're not running Photoshop on this thing. No, Apple doesn't let you.
Have a keyboard. Pippin did have a keyboard.
It didn't have one in the box, but you could
get one.
You could get, well, the US model, some of the US model bundles did have a keyboard in the box, but the majority of the Pippins out there are the 1.0 models in the white case that shipped on the Japanese market.
So I'm sorry to rush you along. It's my own fault for constantly derailing you because I love this topic.
We can edit this, right?
Well, yeah, no, we don't even edit them. But the long shot, you cracked the Pippin.
Right. So long story short, I saw what was going on in the homebrew scene, nothing, and thought, well, it's been 20 plus years since the system came out and nobody has cracked it yet. And I thought, well, I've done a bit of work on, I've done a little bit of Mac OS work. I work with Josh Duran on the Advanced Mac Substitute project. I've helped him out with that a little bit. So I've got a little bit of a background in classic Mac OS API programming. So I thought, well, if nobody has done this yet, then who better to give it a shot than me? So I start digging into it with my friends Josh and Elliot Nunn is another buddy of mine who has done some work in reverse engineering the Mac ROMs. So we start digging into the startup process of the Pippin, and it's very, very similar to that of an actual Mac, except for a notable change, which is right after it senses that you have a CD-ROM inserted, it takes a look at 6 one fixed location at the very beginning of the disk that contains the directory information, and then 5 randomly chosen 128K blocks across the disk. So this makes up about a little bit over a megabyte of space that it checks, digests against a list of digested locations in the disk, and that suffices as a system signature check. And if it doesn't work, it spits out the disk. You can't play it. So I'm digging into this in the ROM, looking at the ROMs, and of course I got the ROM dumps because I ran a ROM dumper using the P's utility I just mentioned. So that allowed me to actually get the ROMs to actually look at them. Sure. And I dig into here and I start looking through some of this code, which, by the way, is hard to read without symbols. I mean, Apple didn't make this easy, but I start deriving some of this, and I'm looking at some of the code that kind of does a lot of shifts and XORs and the number of magic numbers it's adding to it. It's like, oh, these numbers look interesting. Let me plug it into Google and see what comes out. Oh, these are the magic numbers for the MD5 digest algorithm. Oh, that's curious.
Well,
that's interesting. Yeah, and I even Apple in their own tech notes mention that, the Pippin uses an RSA crypto system to implement security. Oh, well, thank you, Apple, for letting me know that. RSA was, I think the patents have since run out on RSA, but the RSA group has also published a reference implementation for RSA. And so I grabbed that and I took a look at the C code versus kind of the C code that I had decompiled myself by hand, and I'm noticing a lot of similarities.
Copy paste.
I think we hit pay dirt on this. And so from that point, it's like, all right, I think I know what we're working with here. So we kind of work backwards. And if we had more time, I could go into like the nitty-gritty technical details, but I wrote it up in a couple of blog posts on my website, blitter.net, if you're interested.
There you go.
But essentially what I wound up doing was I extracted what it did for the signature check into just a tiny block of code that I ran in just an isolated 68K emulator. This is 68K, by the way. The entire boot process of the Pippin, despite being a Power Mac, is all emulated. It's
Absolutely.
running 68K code because Apple couldn't port that in time. So I isolate all this code and run it into a little 68K emulator, providing stubs for the 9 toolbox traps into Apple's ROM that it uses. And I wound up finding these areas of memory where, during the part of the code where I imagined it was doing the meat of the work, it had this little, it was 45 bytes of data that just looked like gibberish to me. But then after it was all done, it zeroed all of it out. Like, why is it zeroing that out? It must be something important. 45 bytes. 45 times 8, 360? 360-bit key, perhaps? So I went backwards and then went back to the digest file that's on the CD, which is easily accessible. Pop it into any Mac and just copy the file. And then looked at it and thought, okay, this looks like it could be a signature area. Let me just try decoding it with this 360-bit block of memory that I found while kind of emulating the Pippin security. Pay dirt. That was
awesome.
That was the public key, and with computing power being what it is now, you plug the public key into something like NSEEV, an open source factoring program. 18 hours later, I had a private key. So now I can.
It took that long.
Yeah, well, all I've got is like a little Intel NUC. That's just my personal PC. So I'm impressed. I was prepared to run it for weeks, but hey, it was done 18 hours later. I'm like, okay, well, these are the keys to the Pippin Kingdom, I guess. What can we do now? Well, I have a tiny utility that can burn my own homebrew disk, but it is not ready for release. In fact, it uses some code that I probably shouldn't be using in it, that I probably should re-implement myself. So I'll probably do that someday. But in the meantime, I had folks coming out of the woodwork on Twitter after my announcement saying, "Oh, this is so great! I can finally port my HyperCard visual novels to a real console."
That's so terrific.
I'm like, all right, well, I wasn't thinking of that, but sure. So I took a couple weeks and put together a bootloader, which I call Pippin Kickstart.
Yes.
And it works a lot like Swap Magic, where you boot the Pippin from this disk, and then it fires up and identifies itself, tells you, hey, you're running ROM version 1 point whatever, and here's how much RAM I detected in your system. So even if you're not looking to boot anything with it, it's a great diagnostic tool. But you fire it up, it ejects itself, and then you can put in whatever CD you want. As long as it's got a bootable system folder, it'll try booting from it. All right.
My question now, the natural question I have is, how many ROMs are there for the Pippin?
How many known ROMs? I know of at least 5, because those are the 5 I have personally preserved and dumped myself. There are the 3 retail ROMs. There's 1.0, which is by far and away the most common that you will find. They're the ones that are in the Pippins with a white case. Those are the Japanese ones.
Oh, the Japanese ones. Okay.
Yes,
and
those are all 1.0.
You've dumped both of the Pippins we had at the museum, right?
Yes. The black one has ROM 1.2, which all US Pippins shipped with at least 1.2.
Okay.
And then the white ones have either version 1.0, or if you have a Pippin dev kit, they have what's called the GM, what's known as the GM Flash ROM. And GM, I believe, stands for Gold Master. And it's the same as the 1.0 ROM, except it's tweaked so that it'll boot from whatever. For dev kits, if you're testing your games, you can't be signing your builds every time.
Yeah.
So there's the GM Flash, and those are not as common. I mean, everything's relative, right? Pippins are not exactly common anyway, but as far as if you find a Pippin that isn't retail, it's more than likely going to have a GM Flash ROM in it.
Gotcha. That's funny because the 3DO just has a switch on the back. They literally put a toggle on the back.
Oh, wouldn't it be nice if everybody did it that way? Anybody who's anybody can make games. That'd be great.
But okay, so the one that we have the one with the crack in it, and then we have the other one that I got from Mac Home Journal back in the day. Was the
right? Both of them are the US model, and both of them have the 1.2. Yep.
So that box that we have, that big white box with the encyclopedia and all that crap on it, that's the standard box that they shipped in?
For the US ones, yes. Yep.
Interesting. It doesn't look like a video game console box.
It's a huge box. Yeah. I mean, I expect, when you get a video game console, like, for example, the N64 came in something that, you could put on a shelf.
It's like a briefcase. It's like a big briefcase thing with a handle.
The base bundle, right? The base option. It's just the console and like maybe a pack-in controller. Maybe. They expect you to buy the game separate, right? Jaguar, same way. NES, same way. Yeah, it's something you could easily put on a shelf and display. Pippin, not so much. It's a computer box.
It's a cube. Yeah. Oh, it is. It reminds me of a CRT box, a small CRT box.
Yeah, even though the system itself is smaller than an original Xbox even. Like, it's a very petite little system, but ships in this gigantic box for some reason. I don't know. Bandai.
Yeah, and it's filled with cardboard. And then they did that keyboard thing. What is the deal with that flip-open keyboard thing? Because there's a picture of it on the side of the box. I never actually had any software that used it except for typing in words in the encyclopedia.
I have never used it for anything other than the keyboard. I think it's supposed to be also a drawing tablet, but I don't have, and the museum doesn't have either, the stylus. It's missing the stylus.
So, I mean, it shouldn't need is the stylus something that was connected to it, or was it just a capacitive stylus? Or
I don't know. It could be something as simple as just like a plastic stylus, like what was used with the Newtons.
Yeah, I'll bet a Newton works. Come on, Newton stylus has to work.
Could be, but again, what software works with it? I don't know.
Well, that's the other question I was going to ask is like, what's interesting that you can be like. First off, is there anything interesting that has been run on Pippin since you cracked it? And second off, what are your favorite Pippin titles, especially the weird ones?
Well, I'm a little biased. My favorite Pippin title was never released for the system. It's the Journeyman Project Pegasus Prime.
and we'll have Tommy on to talk about.
Yeah, and Tommy could better speak to actually the history of the Pippin project and how it actually came to be, because he was there. Yeah. Like I was in elementary school at the time, so that definitely not the one to ask. But as far as anything technical, definitely ask me about Pippin stuff. But as far as that, obviously Marathon. I'm a big fan of the Marathon series.
So that's the one that I referenced before, that Bungie couldn't figure out how to get the platform to reboot an application.
The Pippin port of Super Marathon was the project at Bungie that I don't think anybody wanted to work on. I think they threw Jason Regier on that project as kind of a hazing ritual because it was like nobody really wants to work on this system, and they were more or less straight ports. I mean, they had to change they had to change some ways about the way the game works. Like, for example, the terminals, when you look at the many terminals inside the game, they had to bump up the font size if they were readable on CRTs. You're not running these on VGA monitors anymore. So, double the font size so that you could see that without flicker or whatever.
Oh, man. And like, Durandal, like, has lots of text.
It does, definitely. Very story-heavy game. And even with all the changes, like, they still had to cut things from the game to squeeze it into what little RAM the Pippin has, because the Pippin ships with 6 megs of RAM on board. 1 meg of that is reserved for video, so the OS never sees it, no matter what. And of the remaining 5 megs, like, you've got like 1.5 megs that the OS itself uses, so you've got 3.5 megs left over to squeeze your game into.
That's more than a PlayStation.
That's true, but you also have to contend with, Pippin OS doing whatever it does needing whatever additional resources it needs. So things like music had to be cut. No music in Super Marathon. Even if you add memory, it's like, nope, sorry.
That's crazy.
We just never did. And in fact, there's you can Google for this correspondence between fans and Alex Rosenberg, who also worked on this project. Bungie tried really hard. They wanted to get a keyboard. They wanted to add keyboard support, but Bandai Apple just refused to send them one. It's like, but if you send us one, we'll add support for it. Like, no, sorry.
That's probably a Bandai thing. Just like
could be. It's like
Japanese companies not thinking other companies in the world exist.
Yeah, or it's like, do you want this to be a success? I mean,
right? No. Well, Apple is always hard to get stuff at.
Yeah, the failure of the Pippin can be attributed to a number of things, but one of the things that you can point to is that Apple built the platform, but they wanted to delegate the responsibility to third parties, to licensees. So if you're a developer for Pippin and you needed developer support, if you went to Apple would say, you got to go to Bandai. So you'd go to Bandai, and Bandai would say, we don't know, you got to go to Apple. And you would just get the runaround. And so ultimately what developers would do would be they would call friends that they knew inside Apple that, had some downtime or whatever, that could kind of under the table slip them some information. Not the way to garner developer support for your nascent platform, for sure.
No. And then at the time, it's interesting talking about Bungie developing for it at the time, because no matter how much they wanted to do it, at this time they're knee deep in Myth, and Alex and Jason had to be starting on Halo. Like, they're laying down the foundations of Halo in '96.
Oh, I mean, Super Marathon was it. I mean, calling it an afterthought is being generous. I mean, everybody was needed on other projects. I'm amazed that it got out the door.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, if it had not gone out the door, I think the Pippin would be known for racing days. Which it isn't a bad game, but it's no Marathon, and it certainly doesn't have the cult following associated with the Bungie name that it certainly has now. I mean, the last time that I saw Super Marathon being offered up on eBay, this is to tell you just how rabid the Bungie fans are. Super Marathon copy with the box, even just the CD, I would imagine would fetch a pretty penny, but with the box, $1,500.
Oh my god,
for a Pippin game.
But I mean, if you look at collectibles and you look at like Golden Ages and stuff, this is the Bungie Golden Age. And if you're going to collect Bungie, this is the time to do it, because it is when all of the important people are still there. They're still invested.
Right.
I mean, Doug Zartman's doing the voice for Bob, and Jason and Alex are still cutting code. And,
right. And it's got historical significance too, because if you ask, the average Halo player, hey, what was Bungie's first multiplayer console FPS? What do you think they say? They probably say Halo. But no, it's Super Marathon.
Do they say that? Because honestly, the only time I ever hear modern gamers mention in Marathon is they're like, oh, it's a prequel to Halo, right? Like they have this whole iceberg thing.
But when you mention Halo, like most people don't think of it as a console FPS. But it did ship on Pippin, and Pippin is a console.
I mean, you mean Marathon? You just said Halo.
Oh, Marathon, yeah.
Marathon, exactly. No, they do not think of Marathon as a console.
Yeah,
absolutely true. Absolutely.
I mean, if I had a nickel for every time I mentioned the Pippin to somebody who's like, I've never even heard of this.
Oh, of course not.
I didn't know Apple made a video game system or a video game platform.
But one of the things you pointed out before about the price, I think it really is. A lot of people look at this and go, "What the hell was Apple thinking?" But at the time, this was the model. There were a number of companies doing this, and they were delegating authority of the console's maintenance and development to other people, right? Like 3DO's whole thing was, we're going to do the console, but you guys are going to make the, fight on implementation of the hardware, which there was never any money in the hardware in a console to begin with.
Right. And Apple tried to position themselves where it looked favorable to developers. Like at the time, Nintendo and Sega were demanding a bit of a hefty royalty.
Oh, absolutely.
From every game sold. And Apple was like, nah, we just want a flat $3 or something like that. Something ridiculously low. It's like, we really want you guys to put games out. Well, what happens when you make, something like that low like that is that you get the shovelware.
Yeah, certainly. And it's solving the wrong problem, honestly. I mean, the reason Nintendo had those high fees was to stop shovelware.
Right. I mean, Atari back in the day, they didn't ask for any royalties.
No, well, they thought that they locked out the console with 1976 standard,
That's true,
security.
Yeah, we'll just make a special cartridge connector that only we make, and nobody else can make it.
Well, they
can't.
They also thought that device was only going to play Pong in combat, and that's it. They didn't design it to do anything else.
Right. I mean, Atari sold that system for 15 years. They discontinued the 2600 in 1992.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
It's the only console I can think of that has spanned 3 decades.
I remember early issues of GamePro and EGM include Atari coverage. And it's at the tail end, right? Look, Raiders of the Lost Ark just came out.
I mean, props to them. There was I don't know of any mainstream or at least popular game magazines from the mid '90s that gave the Pippin the light of day.
No, they certainly did not. But,
yeah.
But thank you for coming on here and giving it the light of day to all of our listeners, Keith. And thank you for all of the wonderful work you've done over the years to the museum.
Sure thing. I will wax poetic about Pippin internals all day long if anyone's there to listen.
That's kind of the problem. I don't know that anybody ever asked.
Well, you asked, and I appreciate that. Thanks, Alex.
Well, thank you, Keith. And please keep the Pippin alive.
I will try. No one else is.
And we're back.
So that was a great, very long chat. Thank you so much, Keith, for coming on the show and talking with us, talking with Alex about your experiences. Covered a lot of ground there. We're going to have to cut this a bit short because we've already run way over our allotted time. So, thank you. Thanks for listening to the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment's official podcast. If you've got any thoughts, questions, corrections, or general museum ideas, shoot us an email at info@themade.org.
We'd like to send out a big thank you to everyone who donated recently and to our Patreon supporters who keep the MADE afloat. Patreon donors get to listen to this podcast 1 week before it's released on major streaming servers, and we'll continue that with future episodes every week. Till then, I'm Chun.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Miles. Thanks. We'll see you next time.